welcome back. So excited for this upcoming conversation. As somebody that graduated college in 2008, right into the heart of the recession, seeing what's happening today to early career folks is absolutely heartbreaking. And I'm really excited to have this dedicated conversation. This is something that's come up throughout the day in some of the other talks. And I'm really excited to have a bunch of experts on that candidate experience of folks that are going through this today and what that means. So it is my honor to introduce the moderator for today's panel, my partner in organizing the recruitment automation community and the host of the Recruitment Automation Podcast, and generally wonderful human who you will all adore, the famous Max Notis. Max, I'll let you take it from here.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dave. And everybody who's listening, welcome to our panel, which is Graduating into a Recession, Approaches an Early Career in Campus Recruiting. So with me today, we have four fantastic panelists in Liz, Athena, Judy, and Gabriella. So starting off with Liz, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, your company, and why you're excited to be here today?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Liz Wessel. I'm the co-founder and CEO at WayUp. We are a startup that's been around for about 6.5 years, headquartered in New York City with a team all throughout North America, and we help employers recruit diverse and qualified candidates, specifically with a focus on early career. So this is this is what we do all day. We just talk about early career recruitment, D&I recruitment. Typically, there's a pretty large intersection between those two groups, which I'm sure we'll talk about. And I'm very excited to be here. So thank you so much for having me.
Excellent. All right, Athena, you want to go next?
Thank you guys for having me, and pleasure to join some of the wonderful panelists like Liz that I enjoy speaking with often on these things. I'm CEO and founder of a company called HiredScore. We do artificial intelligence for hiring solutions. Bulk of our work was really focused on jobs requiring 1 year or more experience, because then we can say something about your CV and otherwise, but we actually do a number of things as well in evaluating skills, potential, and what someone, maybe if you don't get the job the first time around, we see 98+% of students who apply in early career don't get hired for the jobs that they apply to. So anyone who is experiencing that, I have a lot of empathy for you, but you are in the majority, not the minority statistically. But there's a lot of work we can do in helping companies find you in the future when there are jobs that are relevant, resurfacing, having you go to a specific pipeline or community of your related interest, and making sure that companies have the ease of toolkits and artificial intelligence to stay in touch and nurture that candidate relationship. So excited to be part of this discussion and discuss how next generation technologies can relieve some of the otherwise human manual work or work not done today.
Excellent. Powerful and poignant for sure. Judy, would you like to introduce yourself next?
Sure, thanks for having me. I'm Judy Panagakos, and I work for Early Stage Careers. It's a small company based in New York, and we provide career coaching to people who are in college, seeking internships, recent college grads, and people who've been out for a couple of years. Prior to working for Early Stage Careers, I was with JP Morgan Chase for 31 years in HR. And I was very involved in running recruiting operations, onboarding operations, and talent acquisition. So I'm now in a role where I'm on the other side of the table, and it's been really interesting helping people and their families, go through this time, especially during the pandemic. It's been really interesting and challenging work. So thanks.
Wow. Awesome. And then last but certainly not least, Gabriella, would you like to introduce yourself to the audience?
Yes, of course. So happy to be here. My name is Gabriella Cuevas. I am a senior relationship manager here at Vendition. At Vendition, we are an end-to-end platforms for individuals to launch their career in sales. I work with a variety of different people. So I work with anyone from a recent grad with no relative professional work experience, and also career switchers, people who have been in different industries for about 5 to 10 years who are looking to launch their career in tech sales. We partner closely with talent acquisition teams along with recruiting teams to help bring out solid entry-level tech sales candidates. And we do this through an apprenticeship model. So day one of the job is day one of the apprenticeship. And what that means is we provide training, coaching, and mentorship to really ensure the sales rep success throughout the first 90 days and long after that as well.
Wow. Awesome. I can definitely relate to that experience. So really happy to have you on this panel. So I want to start off by answering a question that's really aimed towards everybody here. And I think we can all have something to contribute here. But without a doubt, early career job seekers have been some of the hardest hit by this current crisis. So what does the employment crisis look like from your vantage point? And how has that candidate experience changed? What have you seen? Anyone want to take this question away to start?
I'm happy to kick it off. So our platform represents about 5.7 million students and recent graduates. So we've got pretty large sample size to go off of here. So I would say you asked about kind of two components. One, how has it changed? And then two, has the candidate experience changed? So on the former side of recruitment, SMBs, small businesses definitely put the brakes on most hiring. I mean, not everyone. There's some small businesses that were in certain industries, but for the most part, internship hiring dropped by about 46%, and then entry-level hiring certainly dropped astronomically as well. That being said, I will tell you that most of our clients, with the exception of companies that are in spaces that we all know very well, got hit the hardest by COVID, T&E, some retail, et cetera. Most of our clients are actually back in full swing to hiring. They're just hiring at fewer numbers. So I would say, like, for most of our clients that would have hired 1,000 people from, through WayUp a year ago, maybe they're hiring 500 to 600 now. So I can't give you an exact number of what percentage less, and I'm sure it'll start coming out in the jobs reports. But I definitely have been seeing that larger companies are back to hiring, so at smaller rates. That doesn't mean that they'll stop their hiring at those numbers. It just means that they're not committing yet to the full headcount that they would have in the past. Now, on the candidate experience side, we're definitely seeing really high volume of applications. People are looking for jobs at higher rates than ever before at this entry-level capacity. More seniors graduated without jobs than you would have seen in prior years. But I will say that it's becoming more and more competitive. So a lot of, the world where companies felt like they were at a disadvantage and the candidates could kind of choose between 10 offers, that power dynamic has started to shift a little bit. And so that's probably not just at the entry-level capacity, it's probably across all. So we are seeing, from a candidate experience perspective, companies, unfortunately, and I wish this wasn't the case because something that WayUp does exceptionally well is candidate experience, but we are seeing companies are a little less focused on their candidate experience but in their hands. I hope that won't be a trend for a long time because candidate experience is so important. But we've all seen the viral LinkedIn posts about companies posting jobs that they don't actually have just to get a pipeline, which can be really aggravating for candidates and so on.
Oh, man. And just to even chime in on my end, the early stage candidates always had the worst candidate experience to begin with. So now even take away what they had left, it's a tough road out there.
And I will say, sorry, just to go off of that, and there was a comment in the group, or in the stage, I will say campus career fairs used to be a huge priority for companies. And my business has been around for 6.5 years trying to convince people you don't need to go to career fairs. And in fact, by going to career fairs or by focusing on career fairs, you're actually hurting your diversity numbers. Like, every statistic known to man shows that going to career fairs and having that be your prime way hurts your diversity numbers. And if you don't know the numbers, feel free to email my team or go to wayup.com, ask for whatever information we can send it to you. And so I'm actually really excited about the fact that COVID has, pushed people into a virtual first mentality more than I've ever seen any other industry trend before. And that should really fare well for D&I across the board. And that's what we're seeing early days so far.
Wow.
We've had a number of clients too, and I think a lot of campuses are still trying to cling to the career fair model, but move it virtually. And it really hasn't been going well. So a lot of our clients, and we try to prepare them, to go through that experience. But what they're finding is, the technology's breaking down. They're waiting in a queue. They don't get to talk to anybody. And, I really feel for those people because at least the people who've graduated aren't still aiming for the career fair. They're, applying and networking and doing all the other things. So I hope we get the technology bugs worked out in some of those applications.
Wow. Gabriella, have you seen anything interesting working with all these tech sales, new hires? Has the conversation this year changed from previous years?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, to say that the last 6 months has been a challenge would be an understatement. It's been an extremely difficult time, not only for talent acquisition teams, but also for candidates. Here at Vendition, we're seeing 5 times as many applicants and less job postings than ever. I would give advice to people applying and let the candidates know that you really need to stand out more than ever right now. It's simply not enough to easy apply on LinkedIn, drop a resume and a cover letter. You have to find creative ways to talk about your experience and really, really stand out. I will say, though, I'm pretty optimistic about the future. One of the metrics we like to watch is how many of our hiring partners who paused during the shutdown are returning. And in the recent months, we've seen a lot of those companies come back to us. So I'm optimistic for the future. I think we're looking better than we were in spring of 2020. So I think we're moving in the right direction overall.
Wow, good to hear. Athena, do you have anything to add? You mentioned some interesting statistics when you were introducing yourself before that I imagine would be pretty impactful here.
Yeah, I think the just knowing we see about 150% increase in candidate populations across the front door, and I think the awareness that whether it's mostly online or a mix of what used to be in person, move to different digital events, or you're in a pipeline, kind of just knowing, I think the numbers and then how much more competitive it is to get those spots and what are some of the differentiators of extracting yourself from the broader pool. So, in a place where you all might study similar things, you might have one internship or no internship. Judy in early careers can probably tell you how to have done things differently from the start, and probably Liz at WayUp. But absent that, I think there's a lot of mindset towards how do you network virtually? How do you make your application known with other supplemental and outreach and eye-catching things or a blog or other posts? So the notion of how much more important a referral is, it is kind of good news in some ways. I think there's probably also some statistical correlations between lack of diversity and some of the different types of people you want to attract and that referral or those more effective means of getting into the org. But I do think over the last few months, there's been a far greater awareness of every technology that they've deployed, making sure that technology as a standalone is tested, validated, and vetted for not creating a bias, perpetuating a bias. And we're often getting asked, how can you, in an unconscious way, unlock our diversity goals? What can we do differently? So, when companies host town halls or meetups or virtual groups to discuss topics that are relevant for particular populations, they are paying attention of who attends. They are following up. They are putting them in pipelines and talent communities and really trying to get those people into the org. So I think just knowing that there's so much of this digital activity and how much those different touch points that you could participate in do show in the data to convert. And a lot of that investment we're seeing in process automation is not to create a colder experience, but it's to account for the massive rise in applications and the statistical likelihood of you getting the job versus not getting the job. How do all those people who don't get the job still have a positive experience and be there in the future if and when there's a role for them?
Mm-hmm. That's an excellent point. Before we actually move on to the next question that we had lined up here, I wanted to pivot to a question that was asked by Candace Price, who's a member of the audience today. Candace wrote, why does going to career fairs hurt diversity? And Liz, I think that was piggybacking off of your comment. Do you want to elaborate on that before we move on to the next point?
Absolutely.
Oh,
okay,
you're on.
Am I on?
Oh, no.
Absolutely. So a bunch of reasons, but the biggest one by a landslide. So let me start by saying this is not like a WayUp thing. This is, we looked at, there's a software out there that collects resumes at the time of a student coming up to a career fair booth. And this is back when career fairs were not virtual, but in person. And just to share a little bit about the data, we looked at the data of the candidates who were coming to the career fair booths, and across the board, across companies, the candidates were more likely to be white or Asian, and were more likely to be male than the demographic at that university. So why is that? One of the biggest correlations we've seen with career fairs is who has the time to go to a career fair. It's probably someone who might not have a full-time job and be a full-time student, might not have 3 part-time jobs and be a full-time student, and so on. Going to a career fair is really daunting. It takes hours and hours between getting ready, showing up. You want to have a nice suit on that you have to be able to afford. It can be really intimidating. And so at the end of the day, what's really interesting is that, well, actually, let me start with what's really unfortunate is that in our country, socioeconomic status, as we all know, typically correlates to race. And so students who are more likely to work more part-time jobs are unfortunately going to be less likely to be able to go to career fairs. There's a bunch of other anecdotes that I can share. That's the data behind it from an anecdotal perspective. We also just surveyed our user base year over year for the last, probably 5 of our 6.5 years, asking students, how do you like interacting with clients, and do you like career fairs? And it is like a landslide that women are less likely to like career fairs, at least according to the data of WayUp users, which is a large enough sample size. I think it's representative of the country, but less likely to like going to career fairs. And the same goes for students who are typically considered people of color and underrepresented minorities.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. That was very helpful. Thank you, Liz. So now I want to pivot on to the next question that we had lined up here today. Kind of touching on what we even talked about earlier today. And we had a whole conversation earlier about delivering candidate feedback, but getting ghosted, it seems to be a fact of life for every early career candidate. So how have you seen organizations deliver feedback effectively, especially in such a time where candidates tend to be really sensitive? And what sort of feedback leaves candidates with a positive impression to be constructive as opposed to more critical? Anybody want to launch off of that one?
I'm happy to go for it if you'd like, but I feel like I've been talking a lot, so only if you guys would like.
Go for it.
Sure. So quick context again, so you know where I'm kind of coming from with this. So companies will use WayUp to do that first round interview very often. We work in a very cafeteria style, so some companies use us just for sourcing diverse candidates, some companies use us just for screening, and so on. So for those companies who about half of our clients use us, or about half of our revenue is representative of clients who use us for sourcing and screening. So for those clients, we give feedback to every single candidate within 24 hours of when we do their interview on behalf of the client. Mm-hmm. So how do we think about giving interview, and what do we see resonates well? Unfortunately, giving feedback about why a candidate passes or fails is just it's taboo, and it's not usually recommended by lawyers. And so as a result, we don't give feedback about why someone passes or fails. Mm-hmm. Just for those who are kind of not new to HR or just not legally in the know on this. Unfortunately, some candidates will spin the feedback, especially if it's on the phone and not in writing or something like that. And they might just say, you didn't like me. Oh, let me give you a good example. If you tell a candidate, we didn't move forward with you because you just didn't have the right level of energy, you weren't energetic enough, legally, they can sue you. Whether they win, that's, who knows, but they can sue you for saying you're age discriminating because energy correlates to age very frequently. So it's just one of those things that a lot of companies don't want to do. So what we do is we give soft skills feedback, and we're very clear this has nothing to do with why you passed or failed. You'd get the soft skills feedback whether you passed or whether you failed, doesn't matter. So the soft skills feedback we'll give is, hey, this has nothing to do with why you passed or failed, but you should have shown that you did more research or done more research. We can't tell which one it is, mm-hmm. but make sure you show it if you have done it. Maybe there's a better way to answer the phone, et cetera. But so I think the short of it is, if I were an employer, and I am an employer as well, I would recommend when you give feedback, try to be clear that the feedback has nothing to do with why they passed or failed, unless you want to take that legal risk, which you absolutely can do, and there are companies that do it. We don't do it on behalf of our clients. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Really interesting. Judy, I was actually going to ask you, because you're speaking with a lot of these candidates who, of course, many of them are moving forward. A lot of them are getting rejected, and hearing back in a number of ways. What's some of the experience that you've heard about how people are hearing, how they're feeling about these notions?
I would say that probably one of the toughest things our clients, have to work through is not hearing anything back at all. So it's not even that they get turned down. It's almost like, well, that's done and I can accept that. I will say that people getting substantive feedback, it's usually linked to having some sort of an advocate that they've networked with, whether that's a really close person, like a family friend, or just someone who's an alum. And then they're able to route the feedback. You didn't have a certain application in your background. You didn't know, Python, and all the other candidates did. So it's really, really important not only to network, but also if you want to try to get that backstory, to have somebody who can go and find that for you. But most people don't hear back at all. I mean, it's shocking. And I have somewhat of a respect when a company does simply say outright on their application page, we don't respond to people. At least people know not to expect a response, but everybody else is sort of waiting with bated breath for a message that just doesn't come. It's really a tough situation that we put people in.
It's almost that you have to appreciate the honesty to a degree.
No, exactly. Yeah, laying out what your process is super helpful, especially to people who haven't been through it all before. And then just being clear, if you don't plan to respond to people, I think it's stand up to that information.
Mm-hmm. Owning your process in a way.
Owning your process, absolutely.
So, Gabriella, I have a question for you, because there's a lot of these entry-level sales positions. They're really recruiting and bringing these class-based hiring. There's a lot of, you're hiring at scale. You're bringing in so many people because you don't know if they're actually going to be able to sell until you see them in the practice. So when you're dealing with so many people, have you seen any feedback given from companies that you said, like as Judy was saying, like that was appreciated. That was like a really good measure. They held to their hours or anything like that. But also, as we're saying, unfortunately, the majority of the time, you're not hearing back. And if you do hear back, it could be months later. So what are some of the experiences that you've seen over this, like some of this recent wacky time?
Yeah, that's a great question, Max. I think that one of my goals as a recruiter is to always get a response for the candidate, whether it be yes or no. They have to know if they're being rejected or moving forward. And I think that a lot of managers that I work with that I really appreciate is the specific constructive feedback that they give. So although if they are moving forward with another candidate, they will give me a specific reason as to why they didn't move forward with that person. So for example, they would say something like, we didn't see the grit and hustle in this person's why tech sales response. We thought, he or she sounded like they were checking out a variety of different roles, whether that be marketing, customer success, along with sales. So I think that's very helpful for entry-level candidates because a lot of them are shopping around, but they need that direction. When you're applying for an entry-level tech sales position, that is what you should be solely talking about in that initial interview. So I think that's very helpful for candidates moving forward. And that's the type of feedback that I like. What can this candidate take moving forward to do better in other interviews, although they didn't get pushed forward with this specific company? And just to add on to that as well, I do appreciate adding, a rose with the thorn. So some positive feedback as to what they did well at in the interview, along with constructive feedback, I think goes a long way.
I'm going to even take that a step further. I imagine seeing how, especially a salesperson goes about handling 100 interviews and applications will also show a lot about how that person goes about sales.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, if you don't demonstrate your ability to grind and get through the monotony in that initial screen, you're not going to be pushed forward. And that's tough for a lot of recent graduates to know right out from the gate. So that's one of the things I love about Vendition is if you're excited and set on sales, we'll help you craft that story and your narrative to help you land your dream job.
Excellent. Awesome. So I want to pivot actually to the next question. And Judy, I think that you both
Max, could I just add, I think there was an interesting note that Judy and Liz mentioned in one, companies saying you won't hear back from us, and two, the despair of a candidate when they don't hear. I think just on the employer standpoint, our average client is getting around 100,000 to 500,000 candidates in this volume snapshot at that period of time. So one of the things that, I think is a bright artificial intelligence solutions like ours is there's actually the ability for us with the AI, we have this live with a number of clients, to put automated alerts, prompts, and notifications. A lot of times it's not intentional, but when you're a recruiter and you're just underwater with so much volume, remembering that that person applied 3 days ago and that one 1 week ago and that one 2 weeks ago in an open rec, it's so hard to keep track of that data. So actually, this is a place where artificial intelligence can make a much more human process, where we can give automated alerts, prompts, notifications, calls to action in one click and say, hey, even if the answer is no, these people have been sitting there for a week. Let's in one click get back to them. And so there's a lot of exciting ways for companies that might have previously said, we can't deal with the volume, put a disclaimer on the website, you're not going to hear anything. Or recruiters have suffered with, how can I do that and be human to the candidates I do respond to? So it's not even necessarily automated responses. You can fill those responses with any type of content. It could even be, we still don't know, but we're just checking in and letting you know this job has not closed. This process is not over, but we need more time. So hearing something or hearing bad news is so much better than not hearing anything. And a lot of AIs can help manage that process for you towards optimal metrics.
That's a really, really interesting and a really good point. I like that about AI helping to sort and help you organize realistically. You know, a computer helps me optimize as a professional using folder system versus computer. It doesn't take a human element away from it. It just allows me to work at scale a little bit better. And like you said, like if I'm talking to 160 different candidates, there's no way I can be human to these people. But if I have something helping me out, then I can take those actions. So that was a really interesting point that you made there. But so actually, Athena and Judy, I kind of wanted to, I'm very curious to hear this from your side because it really kind of delves into your areas of expertise. And so one of the challenges of early career hiring is, being an early career applicant, is figure out what do you want to do. You know, you may go through college, you may not, you're doing what you kind of had an inertia to do. You don't know exactly what's out there. And especially when the market right now can be so tough, I'm just curious to hear, how do you help candidates navigate what their right next steps are, you know, to help find jobs effectively?
Yeah, a lot of our clients come to us, you know, at some point during college, usually toward the end, and they honestly haven't really thought about it yet. You know, we're not working with many accounting majors, you know, because they kind of know where they're headed. So we offer an assessment program that provides an extremely in-depth set of assessment instruments. And then we have an expert who helps them interpret their results so they get to explore their interests, their preferences, their skills. And then what we do is we take it a step further by doing a pretty robust like job sourcing analysis to look at jobs for right now, like literally like what could you do coming out of these gates right now? And then what jobs might you want to consider 2 or 3 years from now? And we pull real jobs that are open right now in the marketplace and then use that as the bridge between the assessment and then gearing up for their job search. And then from that conversation, we know how to tailor their marketing playbook. We know how to, you know, what to aim for. And I'm always delighted because most people really, it either helps them validate what they thought they knew about what they wanted in life, or it brings new things to light for them. And it can really be enlightening for people to see that, and even for their families to see, you know, these skills emerge that they couldn't put a name to. So often that's the best starting place for us as we start to work with a new client.
So Athena, can you have anything? I feel like a lot of what your company does has a lot to do with that, and reading resumes and then, you know, putting behavior potentially to that and understanding how to direct, and Liz, of course, yourself as well, dealing with so many people just in this early career stage. Do you want to shed a little extra light there?
Yeah, well, I think just the processes are usually different for different threads of jobs, right? So you might have your technical career paths and your sales career paths, your marketing, your creative, others. We usually see a number of assessments, games. So I know Pymetrics was speaking earlier, and Mindex, and then standard assessments or Tradeifys or others. So what we tend to see is there's that almost EQ, IQ, other types of tests. There's also sometimes relevancy in past experience we can pick up from your CV or your degree of study, or, from WayUp, your profile or other information you've enriched it with, or other social media and other footprint data that you give. But I think something that's really interesting is how often we're able to surface people who weren't successful the first time, but for other opportunities in the future that they're relevant for. And that's actually one of the biggest game changers of artificial intelligence in this space. A human to keep track of millions of people at any point in time, one, if they weren't the recruiter at campus or the recruiter on that role, or two, if they didn't have intimate knowledge of the group of people that were finalists for that position, but just not successful, or were missing one or two specific things that were needed. And so I think what gets exciting is kind of candidates viewing it as more a relationship over time with them and the employers that they want to work for, and being okay that if not this opportunity, and it might seem frustrating, but as long as companies are investing more and more in this nurturing engagement, solutions like our Fetch solution, which recover these people at the right point in time and when there's actually a job available. And so getting used to that, both being okay on a candidate side, and then on the company side, figuring out how to incorporate those type of technologies seamlessly into day-to-day workflow processes of a recruiting and a sourcing team, so that they're not just posting a job, praying, waiting for people to come, when 3 months ago you had a great candidate in who would love this job. If they still want that job, how do you approach them and see if that's relevant for them? So we think a lot about not you in that specific one role, but you over the lifetime and over your career trajectory.
Interesting. Good. Liz, I have a question for you, because you're dealing with so many of these candidates coming in at scale. And I imagine that, as they interact with the community, part of what keeps them in the community is their ability to find something that they do like, that they're screened and really routed in the right direction. So what kind of, without giving away too much of, I guess, any secrets, how are you routing these people effectively to make sure that without taking up too much of their time, your time, that you're really putting them, in a seat that would best benefit where they're trying to get to?
I mean, so it's a two-way marketplace. So it's not just us recommending jobs to candidates, but so employers can actually log in, and it's kind of like LinkedIn, but for early career candidates with D&I filters. So you can literally, as an employer, go, I want to log in and I want to find a computer science major whose grad year is between this month and this month of this year, who studies software engineering, knows Java, and is a female or is Black or Hispanic. But you can look up self-reported data, and you can literally go in and source as well. So a lot of our candidates find out about roles and are matched to roles through WayUp's technology, and then a lot are also messaged through WayUp and from employers logging in and sourcing and finding candidates. So I would say our matching is a mix of employers logging in and saying, I want you, or candidates obviously getting messaged by WayUp. I hope I answered your question. And then in terms of screening, every single candidate hears back within 24 hours. So we have a digital screen on WayUp that basically assesses the candidate's qualifications based on whatever the employer puts in as qualifications. 62% of candidates get knocked out, and then the rest go into the ATS of the client. We're not an ATS, we put the candidates directly in the ATS. So that's also like another way that we're able to get smarter and smarter for each candidate about like what jobs are they qualified for, what should we be matching them with.
Mm-hmm. That's helpful. Thank you very much there. So we have a couple of minutes left. It seems like we're slightly starting to come up about time. So I wanted to end this, the questions and the conversation here on more of a positive note with two real questions that I want to ask. Is one, we all know when the company does it wrong, we can all know. We all feel it's wrong. You don't hear back. It doesn't feel right. What are some things that you're hearing companies doing that are right, that really are going above and beyond and setting a good impression? And then for candidates from an early career development perspective, what advice do you have for them today? Coming into this tough time with all these tools, with all these, we have this whole panel here of resources to try to bring these folks into the working world. So what do we hear that's going right from this TA perspective, and what advice do we have for these job seekers out there who are trying to join this workforce that we're lucky to be a part of?
If I could start, when the pandemic first broke, and students didn't know what was happening, we had people who were teed up for internships with major firms. And I think where talent acquisition did a fabulous job is the people who kept people on notice that, we don't know what our plans are, but we're working on it. They weren't just like in radio silence. And some of those organizations went on and did have those internship programs, and maybe they shortened them, but they put those people to work and they got a good experience from it, even if it was only, 5 weeks instead of 12 weeks or whatever they originally intended it to be. And I've even seen some organizations that are in the not-for-profit space that have very robust internship programs going. It's genius. They're bringing in people unpaid in cohorts, like a training class. They're using assessments to screen them. So they're giving them like a complete experience of getting a paid job. And then they're getting, 12 weeks of work experience, even though, it's unpaid, but still it's something that's contributing to their resume, letting them apply their skills. So we've seen a lot of wonderful, wonderful things from certain organizations.
That is great. That's inspiring to hear. Like, especially when a candidate, it's so hard to get a job without experience. At least we can give you that. I think that's a really cool point you're making.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else? What else have we seen that are like really good things that companies have done and can help people out moving forward?
I'm happy to jump in here. I've worked with a lot of different companies all over the country, and I think the best companies that I've worked with are upfront, transparent, and timely. They are very clear about the interview process from A to Z. They are clear on what the difference between an interview with the CMO is versus someone in sales operations. And they're timely about next steps and also the feedback that they deliver. I think something that companies could do better at is not having FOMO, fear of missing out on a certain candidate. If you like a candidate and they check all those boxes, then you should move forward with that person in a timely and efficient manner, because they're probably going to get swooped up. So I would say the biggest thing for me is to be upfront, transparent, and timely. And to just add quickly, some advice I would give to candidates out there that are looking for a new role is just be humble and be grateful. I think that hopping on a call with that, grateful and humble tone will get you far. Take any and every phone conversation. You get better at interviewing as you do it more, and you also get to know more about the opportunity. And depending on what role you're applying for, I think that persistence is key. So making sure that you consistently follow up with anyone and everyone who's given you 15 or 30 minutes is super, super important. And that will allow you to help build your network as well.
Excellent. Great advice there too. All right, we've got 2 minutes left. Liz, Athena, any to add?
Sure. I would say things that the difference between companies that I've seen do a really good job at pivoting post-pandemic or mid-pandemic versus those who have not. And you'd be surprised, like some of the best employers in the world have just done a pretty awful job with the pivot, in my opinion. I think the big difference is those who've slapped the word virtual in front of everything they do versus those who've truly said, this is a different environment, this is a different world, and I'm going to change how I do what I do. I can't tell you enough how many companies seem to be just taking shortcuts and saying like, okay, well, we used to go to career fairs, so now we'll go to virtual career fairs. And they show up for all these virtual career fairs. And these virtual career fairs are not career fairs. Like they're not in, to call them career fairs is bizarre. Or they get inundated with the hundreds of thousands to millions of applications that Athena talked about. And they just don't think about like, I need to look at how I'm assessing these candidates in a different way because of the volume. Like it's baffling to me that some companies have just tried to put quick band-aids, especially when it doesn't seem like normal is going to come back for quite a while. So I would just say that's been a big difference. Rethink how you do your D&I recruitment. Like you don't just have to go to an HBCU and call it like a day and say, yay, I let me pat myself on the back, I accomplished D&I, like think differently about how you can now recruit with the internet.
Awesome. Excellent. All right. And then Athena, you want to wrap things up for us?
Yeah. A big burden to wrap up for such a great group. I'd say two things. One is, I don't know who these delinquent employers that you guys are talking about, because my clients have been, nothing but inspired and impressed us. They have come to us early and said, here's what we would want to do in the physical world if we had thousands of recruiters. How can we automate that, augment that? How can technology help us do that better, easier? So I think to the employers here, just understanding when you have kind of the real AI solutions, deploying capabilities that can not just process data, but comprehend data and give, we had one client that said every 24 hours, I want my recruiters to get an email of candidates that are at risk of redeployment or at risk of redundancy who might be a good fit for their jobs and others. And when you're dealing with thousands of people in mass and hundreds of jobs kind of going away and being open and being canceled and being frozen, it's an impossible human challenge, but been really inspired, I think, by how technology has now helped put the human in the driver's seat of being human and contacting more, and clients actually counting how many more candidates are we able to have physical discussions with because we've reduced manual work or irrelevant work that's not human facing. And so I think that's one on the employer. And on the candidate side, we've seen a lot more of our clients work with communicating to the market the online certificates, online degree, skills verifications, badges that candidates can be taking, and that those do have a weight and those do have a currency and they are being valued. So I think just the candidates, there are things you can do, especially in certain departments and divisions, to increase your currency. And if you looked at the job post 1-2 years ahead of where you want to be, and you see virtual certifications or credentials, there's a lot of online courses you can take to work to that. And our clients are really looking for that in the data. So
great point. All right. So everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been a fantastic panel.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you all.
Awesome. So we're going to turn this back over to Dave Meckelberg, our organizer today, and we'll see you all soon at the talent show and everything else we have to come.